Pune's most biggest cloud event. So my name is Pratik, co-organizer GDG Cloud Pune. So we'll be starting this event. So I had to Nanda.
Good morning everyone. I'm the co-organizer GDG Cloud Pune. Welcome you all to Google Cloud Community Day Pune 2023. So before moving forward, let's have a look to the amazing event we hosted last year. So we had a blast with about 5,000 plus registrations, 450 plus attendees and 10 plus speakers.
So last year also we had a similar competition. So you guys can scan the QR code and these are the hashtags that we'll be using. So in the end, we'll announce 3 winners who will get the most likes on the social media platforms. So that is Instagram, Twitter and LinkedIn. So you can just scan this QR code for that and you'll get all the social media handles from here. Okay. So how's the Josh guys? This is not high. How's the Josh? How's the Josh? Okay. Breakfast हो गया ऐसा लग रहा है अभी ठीक है. Okay. So I guess we can.
Okay, so keep in mind the capital and small letters used in the hashtags. Okay, so before any further delay, we will start the event. We have an amazing lineup of speakers with cutting edge demos and the surprise in a way. So sit back and enjoy. You'll get to learn various things today.
Okay, so
I would like to call Antrik sir on stage for the welcome note.
Good morning, guys. So, how's the thing? All good? Those who don't know me, my name is Antriksh Gupta, an organizer for the GDG Cloud Pune and ambassador at Gartner. So, thank you so much for coming to this event at GDG Cloud Pune that is organizing. We are second year in a second way that Cloud Community Days and show us a great response over the registrations for the events, and thank you so much for the volunteers. This year we received last year we received almost around 56 nominations for speaking slots. This year we got almost around 158 slots. So that is a great achievement. That is the impact that we left in the last event. Few of the speakers this year, those who were in the attendees last year, that is another achievement for us. We build this community for the community so that everybody count their learning in this larger platform. So I won't get much more time on the stage and invite the other 2 hosts, those who will continue the event, Bhumi and Rahul. Thank you so much, guys. Enjoy your event. If you face any issues, just reach out to next to your volunteers team. Thank you.
Good morning, cloud enthusiast. How's the Josh? Good. So, welcome to Google Cloud Community Day 2023. So, I am Rahul Mistry. I'm third year engineering student at PS Modern College of Engineering. I'm on my way to become a data analyst
And this is Bhumika here. I am a data engineer at Deutsche Bank and I'm really happy to see you all here on a Saturday morning.
So, starting with the session, we have our first speaker, Mr. Romin Irani, developer advocate at Google Cloud. And the topic of his session is going to be from code to production on Google Cloud.
With over 25 years of experience in software industry, Mr. Romin brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise to us today. As a developer advocate at Google Cloud, his role is to empower developers like us and help them leverage cutting edge tools and platforms for accelerated software delivery and enhanced security. Ladies and gentlemen, huge round of applause for Mr. Romin.
Good morning, everyone. Am I audible? Okay. All right. Thanks for coming in today for CCD Pune 23. So what I'm going to be talking about today is primarily I wanted to give you all a picture of the different tools, services that are available if you as a developer have to construct something end to end. And what I mean by that is not that we'll be looking into how do you develop something, but really what are the tools available to go from code to production. So what I want you to take back really is that across this whole end-to-end cycle, what are the different services, tools, right from an ID to right till the production point of view. And then of course there are various other talks that will go into the details of some of these services. So that will easily expand upon this. So first up, right, just a show of hands, how many of you have developed some code, try to put it up on a cloud or any other server, need not be Google Cloud, just a show of hands. How many of you have developed something with containers? Okay, just to give me some sort of a context over here. So I'm hoping that if you put your hands up, it also means that you are aware to a certain amount of extent the toil, the friction that really is there in building out software where you make the smallest of changes, you build out the container, you deploy it, you put it in production, so on and so forth, right? So it's really the whole cycle that I want to show end-to-end and what are the tools that are there today. So let's get started. And first up, right, I mean, cloud-native software is really, what you've been sort of hearing for a long time now. And if you couple, both the managed services as well as the whole container model that's there out there, then really it becomes a powerful combination. But at the same time, to do that would require what kind of features are there, how we are giving you the end-to-end story to make this productive in the first place, right? So having said that, I wanted to go through from Google Cloud perspective, what are the different, I would say tools, and we'll of course look at those in a little bit more detail. But first up, right, we hope that we have a platform that is complete enough to help you work with containers and take you end to end, right? So different steps which you see. So from now, I want you to focus maybe on the Google Cloud column. And then of course on the left side, I'll take you to various stages, whether it's developing, whether it's building, whether it's deploying, whether it's operating and so on. And various tools that you see there. So from a development point of view, right? How many of you have used VS Code in some way or the other? Okay, great. How many of you have heard about something called Google Cloud Code extension in VS Code? Not that many hands go up, which is fine, which means we still have to do our job. But at the same time, I'll try and show that demo out here today also. But really speaking, the point is probably the Google Cloud SDK at the command line or the APIs you'll have used in some way or the other. Cloud Code is our extension in popular IDs. And Cloud Workstations obviously is the enterprise version of it, which just simplifies if you have to roll out IDs or developer workstations across a team with some security policies built in. As you move along, right, in the steps, so you're developing something out there, maybe one option is you just want to even migrate. There's migrate for containers tool set out there, but what is more important is the next step, which is build. Under build, right, so we are talking here about cloud native software, talking about containers. So what are the tools that we have that make this possible? So one is, of course, you can write your own files, but there's a concept of build packs which we support, which can actually observe your application, understand it, and try to generate a container image out of it. But then later on, you need to put it somewhere, right? So that's where Artifact Registry, that's a newer version of the Google Container Registry out there, but not just Docker images, but also, but also even programming language packages. So whether it's Node packages, whether it's, if you're using Java, then the Maven, packages that you want. So that's where you can store things. But then the next thing is, you need to deploy that, or you need to build it out in the first place, right? So you're trying to create this container, and before you push it out into the registry, you need to build it in some way or the other. So obviously you write all those commands, but then eventually when you need to move it to a particular runtime environment, there are two tools you can think of out here. That's Cloud Build, and there's Cloud Deploy. Cloud Deploy, again, I think of this more as an opinionated tool to do CI/CD, but build can be thought of as a very general tool. I'll show you that how it works in step-by-step. Pretty much things like today you do a Docker build, you do a Docker push, then you might run a command to actually deploy this service somewhere. All of this you can sequence out in this Cloud Build tool that's there. Next thing is, of course, once you build this artifact, you need to deploy it in a runtime, right? And later on, there is a talk by Weber where he'll discuss with you what could be possible options from a runtime option. In this case, we're talking about containers, so I'm just showing you some options that we have here around GKE, or it could be Cloud Run for that matter. And finally, right, you've also got the operating part, which is Operations Suite. So this is the whole monitoring, logging, tracing, error reporting, those things. So if you just look at this, right, and this is what I want to expand a little bit more on. You've got various steps and then various tools that are out there. Don't worry right now if some of these tools you've not come across. What I want you to take back from the session also is that these tools exist, and maybe you can study more, or you can at least come to know how some of these things work. You can mix and match these tools. You don't have to use all of these tools together. If I take this, if I take this slide and probably visualize it in a different way, this is the picture I want to present that you take back at the end of the session. So the same stuff which you saw earlier with all the tools, etc., I'm just showing you now in a more end-to-end scenario. So if you start from the left, right, that's where you are in your IDE, developing stuff. But at the end of it, so you're basically doing your unit testing, your development there. Once it's time to maybe push it out to an environment, you might go down the route of saying, let me push that into a source code repository. On pushing that into that, something gets triggered. What's that? That's the Cloud Build tool that says, okay, you checked in some code, I can now build that out for you, run some tests, etc. And then once the container is built, I push it into the artifact registry. I could always use an opinionated way. You can use one of either Cloud Build and Cloud Deploy in some way, or even together. But eventually, you push this out into a runtime and you do the operations. So the same thing which I was trying to, if I just go back for a moment, those steps, it sort of gets visualized with different services out here. I also want to take a few seconds here to just talk about the fact that it's not just about developing something out there, pushing it into production, everything is fine. That's one way to look at it. But if you look at security, which I'll talk about in a while, there needs to be security built in at each of these steps. So even if you're developing software, right, are you using the dependencies which are free of any known vulnerabilities that are out there? Similarly, like for example, if you try to deploy it into a runtime environment, it should absolutely not allow if it has not been signed or there's not enough attestation done by the right kind of tools that you wanted to build it. So security has to be across. We'll talk about that also in a while. So let's focus first, right, on the ID, the development side of things, right, and what happens there, right? So given this, right, I wanted to talk about this picture. Inner loop, outer loop. Probably you've heard about this in some way or the other, but really speaking, as a developer, think of it, you're on the left side, which is the inner loop. That's where you're developing stuff, you're doing maybe some of your, unit tests, and the cycle goes on and on and on, till you feel it's good enough to push it out to an environment. And when you do that, the outer loop gets kicked off, maybe a build tool takes over, builds it, runs some more integration tests, and then pushes into an environment, right? But primarily speaking, most of your time as a developer, if you think of that persona, would be spent on the inner loop. And you know this is not really optimized today for container-based development. The reason I say that is the smallest of changes would require that you build the container image again, deploy it in a local environment, run the tests and so on, right? So if you look at the challenges, so many of them, right? If you just have to work with containers, think about the tools I'm telling you to think about, or you probably have used. There's kubectl, there's Docker, there's maybe some other package manager. You need to switch between environments, switch between tools. it's not easy at all. So you need a tool that really helps you to optimize this inner loop. And that's where exactly we bring in Cloud Code, which is the extension that I was talking about. Of course, it can be in VS Code, it can be in other IDEs also, but it just makes that whole task a bit easier for you to manage when you're doing your local development. And by the way, it's also available in case some of you who are familiar with Google Cloud. We've got a Cloud Shell. How many of you have never heard about Cloud Shell in Google Cloud? I've asked the other way the question, not heard about. So everyone has heard about Cloud Shell? How many of you, okay, let me put it simple. How many of you have heard about Cloud Shell? Okay, so in case you feel there's no IDE out there, just try to switch. You'll find the same extension already installed over there too. Enough of talk. I'm going to get down to the demo to make things a bit more interesting. I'll try to do some development, just show you a bit of what the features are. And for that, I'm hoping at the end, just let me know in terms of the font size to manage this. So I'm going to go to my VS Code that's out here. Now, first up, so let me get a few things right. So how about the font? I'm not really going to type a lot of things, but as long as you can see what I'm clicking and follow me, that should be fine. At the end, looks okay? Yes, no? Okay, all right. Fine. So I'm in VS Code. I've installed, obviously, the Cloud Code extension that's out there. And if you see over here, when you click Cloud Code, of course, you can get it from the palette and things like that, for those of you who are familiar with VS Code. But really speaking, you can get several options like this, where you can, right over here itself, right? It could be a new application, what kind of application you want. Let's say you say, I want to take a sample Cloud Run application, which particular programming language, and it can generate a starter template out there for you. So that's one way to look at it. You can even import your existing sample. So what I've done here is, I've got already a straightforward Go application which can be deployed in Cloud Run. And the way you would run this is, now again, what I want you to see, just observe, is that loop which I was talking about. That if I make a change, does it detect my changes? Does it trigger a build of the container image again? Does it deploy it locally? Does it know what precisely differences to apply, etc., etc.? So that's what you'll see out here. So first up, right, I just want to maybe take this and say, run it on this emulator. So this can take a few seconds out here. Seconds is safer to say than minutes. It just makes you feel a little bit okay. But in any case, so what's happening out here is taking your application, it's packaging it as a container behind the scenes. How many of you have heard about this open source tool called Scaffold? So Scaffold is what is utilized behind the scenes out here. So right now what's happened is it's sort of launched this, and if I just run this out here, you can just see that it's a straightforward application. It's running locally, all good. What has it done behind the scenes, right? And this is where you'll start seeing its power. So if I go to the Cloud Code extension, you find that if you look at this, it's created a local Minikube profile and started off cluster. And on that, it's deployed the Cloud Run application. So literally, you're not deployed this in your live Cloud Run application in the cloud, but locally things are going on. And those of you who are familiar with, let's say, Kubernetes, in this case, this is my application. For example, desired replicas, right? I can literally change things from here itself and change it to another number. This will then create these additional pods that you see, and all of these three, came up. So all of this stuff, including like maybe even getting the logs for a pod, getting into the terminal, you can control completely from out here in the local environment itself. Now, as a test, right, let me just go here. It's running. And those of you who are familiar with a hot code reload and things like that, it's also supported. So maybe I can, let's increase this. So maybe I'll go out here and say, save this. Now when I do that, what's happened behind the scenes is it started to build the thing. I've not done anything else other than a save. It's once again, as you can see, build the whole container for you, deployed it, and this particular stuff now, if you again run it, you'll see it got the change. And so, I'm just showing you the efficiency of the whole cycle out here. Another way to look at it, I'll just stop for a moment and maybe go to Cloud Code and say debug. So the things that you are typically familiar about, even from a point of view of putting breakpoints, etc., and seeing that work, it's completely supported. So once it comes up here again, so you can see behind the scenes, every time you're doing a run or whatever, it sees what are the changes, it builds the container image, deploys it into a local Minikube cluster, and brings up the pods, etc. And once it's up here, which you can see, and sorry, did I do a debug? So I go over here, do a refresh, and you can see I put a breakpoint, which is where it is actually come in here. Any point in time, right, you could just use the other capabilities that are there to see the values, etc., and just again launch it, right? So again, the point over here was just to show you the whole development loop, how efficient it is. You can make the changes, you can deploy it from here, you can do the debugging, and all of that stuff. Now, having said that, if we go back to our presentation, I just wanted to switch to the outer development loop now, right? So we made some changes. I mean, one way could have been to directly put it in, Cloud Run, maybe use gcloud run and other commands, but probably we want to follow practices, which are like probably you put that code in source code, and maybe there someone reviews it, and once it's good enough, could be a pull request, could be a commit to a branch, could be a commit to the main, could be anything of that sort, right? So you can use these triggers to kick off the outer development loop. So once you push it into source code, it should start building the stuff out for you, put it into the live Cloud Run environment and so forth, right? So that's where that same diagram, right? I'm just showing you the latter parts of it, which is we're done with some of our development over here, and now we're going to push it into the source code repository. This pushed, let's say, to a main branch or so as a test, would kick off a build. This build then goes, and then it could run its tests. You could do one or more sequences, and then finally deploy it into a particular runtime environment. Again, the point to note here is that eventually whatever is built can be also pushed into the artifact registry, and I'll show you a few things there out too. So the demo that I wanted to show quickly here is that the same change that we made, or we'll make some changes, right, whatever that might be, and we push it into GitHub. I've connected the repository to the local source code, and then that should kick off a cloud build. It should push it here and into a live environment. So I'm just going to go now for a moment back to, let's stop this. Okay. And I'm out here, and if I just switch over to, let's say, the repository, this is the repository that I've connected to. And for a moment, I'll just go over to the Cloud Run console, and let me close this, and triggers. So if I look at triggers in Cloud Build, let this come up. So I've already configured a trigger, connected it to the actual GitHub repo. So what I'm saying is that anytime there's a push to a branch, I'm hoping this is, anytime there's a push to a branch, what's the branch? I'm just going to select main right now here, and it should run something in the cloudbuild.yaml. So if you look at the YAML file, what is it doing? It's doing something of this sort, which is that same steps. It builds out the container image. The second step is pushes into the artifact registry. And third step, if you see it, deploys it to Cloud Run. So on push to the main branch, it should kick off this build, which does all of these steps. So what we are going to do now is, let's say, what's the change that we made? Let's say we went to index, and we said CCD Pune 2023. So I'll go to the source here. Maybe I'll just stage this index. Discard changes. Oh, sorry. I clicked discard, sorry. So I'll stage the index. Then I'll just say maybe updated here. I'll commit this, and I'm going to push this. So once the push is done, let's go for a moment to our repo. Let's refresh this to see if something came in, which is right now, this is the change. And this is a small change. But what this would have done in the background is, let's go back to our cloud build. And if you look at history of builds, you see this thing has got busy. So it's actually kicked off a build in the background once the code has got pushed into the main branch. And this is, if you look at the details of the build, you will see those same steps which we had, which is it builds out the Docker image, it then pushes into the artifact registry and updates the version. What I wanted to show you while this build is going on is a few other things, which is if I go to the artifact registry, right, the security part that I was talking about, or let's go for a moment to the presentation while this will get done in a minute. Okay. So the security part which I was talking, right, each of these steps, right, you saw some things happening at workstations, then the cloud build taking over, pushing it into artifact registry, and then finally we are deploying it into any one of these environments. There needs to be security at each step in the supply chain, right? So you could be using potentially vulnerable libraries or dependencies which you want to avoid there. Similarly here in the artifact registry, when you push something, does it also do its own vulnerability analysis to see if there are any CVEs that are known, right? And similarly, there's a concept called binary authorization, which is an admission controller. So if the container you're trying to run on a pod is not attested by the right credentials, then it'll reject those pods from getting instantiated too. So this is what I wanted to just mention. And for a moment, let's go back to our console. So the build details, this whole thing has got successfully done. If we look at our cloud run UI in the console, there are many services, but the one I particularly deployed, which you see just now, this one. And if we see that and go to the URL, obviously that's the small change that we made. That's also got deployed to the live environment. Now, let's go to the repositories, the artifact registries. I was talking about the security part, right, the known CV. So if I'll go into that particular, I would say, repository and that image which I'm deploying, let it come up. You'll see as I keep building it, there are multiple versions of it. And the most recent version that was just built right now, you also see this whole thing called vulnerabilities. And if you click this, that's where it also shows you the different vulnerabilities that are there. So accordingly, you can actually create rules that say if there are any high priority ones, it'll just be rejected and the build will fail. You can do things at that level also. And this got done only by a simple setting in the artifact registry, which is vulnerability scanning. I've kept it as on. So anytime there's anything pushed into the repository, it kicks off this and validates it. Now, the final thing I just wanted to show is, where's the presentation? It's here. Is the operate part, right? And again, there's a whole, tons of sessions we could have on this, but really speaking, we make this simple because there's in-context operations, or you can say metrics or observability data that's provided to you for a service. So if you go, for example, when I say in context, what I mean is you're in Cloud Run, right? But as you went to that service, you found that there were already some of these observability, the key metrics that we can easily calculate, whether it's latency, number of request counts, and directly from here, right, you can even start doing things like either creating your own dashboards from it, creating any particular alerts if you like, things like that, right? So it's made easier for you so that as a developer, right, you saw the loop about inner loop development optimization. Then you build things, you push it into production, security at each stage. But even from an operational analytics, or I would say observability point of view, there are in-context dashboards which you can look at. So at least as a developer, you know what's going on with your service. Finally, that's what the presentation is about. And I think at the end of the day, I want you to just take out this message that's there from an end-to-end story that's out there. You saw a few tools, but you'll also see some of our speakers dive into some of these services accordingly. Finally, this is just a bit of, joining the innovators thing. If you would like to learn about the platform, we've got things that are going on right now which can give you credit. So at least you can experience the platform. You can try out the different labs that are out there. But it begins with just joining the Innovators program. So go for it. It'll just allow you to try out several labs without having the credits, because they'll give you some of these credits out here. Hope this was useful. Thank you so much for joining us today. And do catch up anytime you want during the rest of the day if you've got questions on this. Thank you so much.
We have had the privilege of gaining valuable insights from Mr. Romin sir during his enlightening session on Google Cloud DevOps platform.
So we would like to extend our gratitude, and for that I would really request Antriksh to please come on stage, and on behalf of our team we need to felicitate Mr. Romin.